Welcome back to the basic series of Vivien tutorials. Now that we have a venue for our event and we've added some objects to it, let's look at how to change their look and feel in order to make them appear more like their real-life counterparts. This is accomplished in the Objects Properties dialog. So this is where we'll spend most of our time in this tutorial. Along the way, we will enlist the help of Vivien's pop-up frames, which will make it easy to almost instantly see the properties changes that we are making to our objects. All objects that have been added to the event diagram have a properties dialog from where various details are set and controlled. These details include, but are not limited to, the layer that the object belongs to, how the object appears in the drawing wireframe and shaded view, the object's size, and so on. Let's start by opening the file we saved at the end of the last tutorial by clicking its name in the Recent Events list on Vivien's welcome screen, or click More to browse for your file. Once your file is open and you're viewing your event in the Drawing Wireframe tab, there are many ways to access or open an object's properties dialog. But the easiest and fastest by far is to simply double-click on the object. Depending on what object you've selected, the tabs at the top of the Properties dialog will differ, but the first tab, General, which is used to modify objects' layer and how the objects appear in the drawing wireframe, will always appear for all objects. The Appearance tab will only appear if the selected object can be seen in the virtual view, and is used to define the object's color, texture, and material options. The same applies to the Light Emissions and Sidedness tabs, which will be discussed in future videos. The last tab is specific to the selected object and is named after it. As you can see, since we've opened the properties for our stage, which is a riser object, the last tab is called Riser. This tab appears for all drawn objects and can be used to modify their size and other object-specific characteristics. It will not appear for library objects, though, since their physical shape cannot be modified. To close the Properties dialog and apply the changes you've made to the object, click OK. If you did not make any changes, or if you do not wish to apply the changes you've made, or to simply close the Properties dialog as I am doing now, click Cancel. Two other ways to open an object's property dialog are to select the object and press Alt and Enter on the keyboard, or to right-click on it and select Properties. This is what I'm doing now with the dance floor object, so we can have a more detailed look at its General tab. On the left side of the dialog, we have the list of layers that we have so far defined in the file. The highlighted layer, in this case Stage, indicates that the selected object exists on this layer. To change the object's layer, simply click on another layer and then click the Apply button. This button allows you to apply changes to the object without closing the Properties dialog. Note how as soon as Apply was clicked, the color of the dance floor object changed to match the color of the Miscellaneous Items layer. It is important to note that clicking Cancel after you've clicked Apply will not revert the changes you've applied. By default, objects in wireframe view appear in the color of the layer they are on, but for special cases, you may override this color if you wish by clicking to uncheck the Use Layer Color option, selecting a new color, and then clicking Apply. It is important to note that the object will only appear in the selected color within wireframe views. This color takes precedence over the layer color, and changing the layer's color later will not alter this object's color. This option can be useful if you wish to identify a special object by a different color in your diagram. To once again make the object appear in its layer color, click the Use Layer Color checkbox again, and then click Apply. Line Weight is a more advanced option that will be discussed in a future video. There are times when parts of the event diagram, such as fire exits, or in our case the dance floor, need to be hatched in order to indicate that other objects should not be placed there. Most drawn objects, including risers, surfaces, polygons, and circles, may be hatched. To hatch an object, simply click to check the Show Hatch Lines option. If an object cannot be hatched, it will simply not be possible to click this checkbox. Discussing hatching further is beyond the scope of this tutorial, but I encourage you to read more about this option in the Vivien User's Guide. I will now click OK to close the Properties dialog and apply the changes I've made to the dance floor. As you can see, this object now appears hatched. Note the hatching is only visible in Plan View. Since we've now made a significant number of important changes to our file, let's not forget to save it. We will next look at how to change various objects' appearance in virtual views. Before that though, in order to avoid having to switch to the virtual view every time we make a change, we will first open a virtual view pop-up frame, which will show the changes as soon as they're committed. To do this, switch to the virtual view, right-click within, and then click Open in Pop-up Frame. This opens as a new window which can be resized and positioned as necessary, and is controlled the same as the virtual view itself. The window will remain open until you close it by clicking its Close button. Should you save and then close the file with this window opened, it will automatically open again in its last position the next time you open this file. We will now switch back to the drawing wireframe and double-click on the venue in order to access its properties. There are no changes to be made in the General tab, so we'll click the Appearance tab, as mentioned earlier. This is the tab in which we define the object's appearance in the virtual view. Most objects are composed of multiple parts or elements as listed on the left. Any changes made on the right side of the window are applied to the selected element. It is of course possible to select multiple elements to modify at the same time, as you will see next. Let's first modify the venue's walls. By default, much like in wireframe, all drawn objects' elements inherit the color of the layer they are on. This is due to the fact that, as you can see, their default color option is Layer Rendering Color. To assign a different color to the walls, click to select the first wall, then hold down the Control key on your keyboard and click the other 4 walls in succession. Next, click the Custom Color option, click the color box next to it, pick a color, and click OK. Finally, click Apply and you will instantly see the new color on the venue's walls in the pop-up frame. There are, of course, no changes to be seen in the drawing wireframe because the controls in the Properties dialog's Appearance tab only affect the virtual view. You could assign a color the same way to the floor, but a venue's floor is rarely as simple as this single color. For this reason, Vivien offers 2 other options to make it look realistic: Texture from Library and Image Source. As you will soon see, the Image Source option will allow you to import a picture you took of the carpet or of the tile pattern in the venue and apply it as a texture. If such an image is not available, or not yet, you may be able to find a similar pattern among the thousands of textures that are now packaged with Vivien. Click the Texture from Library option to open Vivien's Texture Selection window, and either browse through the textures or search for one that you are already familiar with. Once you find the appropriate texture, click Select and then click Apply to see how it appears in the virtual view. If you find a texture with the appropriate pattern, but not quite of the right color, click the color box next to the Color Tint option in order to pick a color that will be used to colorize or tint the selected texture. For example, the texture I require here needs to be a little more orange, so I select this color and then click Apply. This is now a little too orange, so I can change the scale of the tint until it looks right. A texture may be tiled or stretched upon the element it was assigned to. When tiled, the texture image will repeat across the element multiple times at intervals defined in the width and height fields. For example, I know that my venue is 65 feet wide and 85 feet deep, so if I set a tiling value of 5 feet for both width and height, the texture will repeat 13 times along the width of the room and 17 times along its depth. When stretched, the texture will appear only once across the element. This option does not necessarily apply to venues unless they happen to feature a tapestry, but will come in handy for other objects, especially when image sources are used, as you will see in just a minute. Finally, a texture may be rotated either as an effect or because it does not line up as intended with the element it was assigned to. For example, the carpeting pattern I selected earlier is not parallel to the walls of the venue, but diagonal to them. Therefore, I must enter or select from the drop-down an angle of 45 degrees in order for the texture to appear correctly. Instead of clicking Apply, I will now click OK to apply the changes and close the Properties window at the same time. This is also a good time to save the file. The tint, tile, or stretch and rotation options work exactly the same way when an image source is used. As mentioned earlier, Vivien's image source feature allows you to import any image into the current file and use it as a texture. Its usefulness does not stop there though. It can also be used to import company logos that are used to texture video screens, to import pictures of artwork that might adorn an event space which could be used to texture objects that represent that artwork, or even to import images of landscapes or city skylines which can be used to texture large surfaces placed outside a venue's windows in order to give the event space a more realistic feel. For this event, the band that's going to perform would like their logo to appear across the front of the stage, so we must accommodate them. Let's select the riser object that represents the stage and access its properties as we have done before. Since images and textures can only appear in virtual views and objects' looks are controlled from the Appearance tab, switch to this tab if not already there, and then click the Riser Front element to select it. This is the element to which we will add the band's logo. Click the Image Source option. The Image Manager is used to import external images that are to be used in this file. Click the plus button in the top left corner to bring up the standard Open dialog. Navigate to where the image you would like to use is stored, select it, and click Open. The image now appears in the Image Manager's preview area. The name of the image you selected is automatically set as the name of this image source, but this may be changed by typing a new name in the source name field. Should you need to change the image itself at a later time, click the Folder button in the Source Path field and select a new image as you've done before. The Image Manager window may be resized if required by clicking and dragging its lower right corner. This is typically not necessary unless the image in the preview area needs to be displayed at a different size, which is accomplished by selecting a new value from the Show Image at drop-down. There may be times when the image needs to be flipped horizontally or vertically, which can be done easily by checking the appropriate checkboxes. The image subsources and other display settings are more advanced topics and will therefore not be discussed at this time. Click OK to add this new image to the file and return to the Riser's Appearance properties. The image source drop-down now contains the image source you've created. If you had more image sources in your file, you would use this drop-down to choose between them. Click Apply to see the band's logo on the front of the stage riser, but note that it appears multiple times because the Tile Texture option was selected by default. To make the logo appear only once, click the Stretch Texture option and then click Apply once more. That's better. If the logo needs to be kept in its original aspect ratio, click to check the Keep Aspect Ratio checkbox, then click Apply. Additionally, if required, click the Border Color box to change the color of the border that typically appears when an image source is stretched. Click OK to apply the changes you've made and close the Properties window, and use the same technique to texture the rest of your model. The final tab in the Properties window that we will discuss in this tutorial is the Object-Specific tab, which always appears last. Double-click on the dance floor to open its properties and click the Riser tab. From here, if required, you may change the size of this object as needed by typing new values into the available fields. Checking Lock Ratio checkbox that appears for some objects will ensure that the width to height ratio of the selected object remains the same. As mentioned earlier, all drawn objects have their own Properties tab, which I encourage you to explore on your own with help from the Vivien User's Guide. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to save your file before closing it.